Good evening. I would like to call the Monday, May 21st, Richmond City School Board to order. Madam Clerk.
Will the board members who are present please respond? Ms. Dorr, Mr. Barlow, Ms. Gibson.
Here.
Mr. Young.
Here.
Ms. Cosby. Here. Mrs. Burke.
Here.
Ms. Owen.
Here.
Dr. Sapini.
Here.
Mrs. Page.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum and you have been joined by your student, Chloe Wood. We do have an interpreter here this evening.
Muy buenas tardes. Para aquellos que hablan español, estamos aquí para proveer servicios de interpretación. Por favor, solo levante su mano o háganmelo saber y con gusto le ayudaré. Thank you so much for having us, and if anyone needs interpretation services into Spanish, I'll be more than glad to provide. Just raise your hand and let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item.
The next item is 1.03, Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence.
We would like our student representative to lead us in the pledge, please. You may be seated. Next item.
The next item is 1.04, adoption of the agenda. I do have two changes, Madam Chair. The first is to remove 2.04 from recognitions, the rule of law essay winners. They asked to come at another meeting, and add an update on preschool at Summer Hill, and that will be item 7.05. Those are the only changes I have at this time.
Need a motion?
I move that we approve the agenda as amended.
Second. It's been moved by Ms. Owen and seconded by Ms. Burke to amend the agenda as received. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing that we have none, the agenda has been amended as received.
The next item is 1.05, approve the minutes of the April 30th, 2018 meeting and the May 7th, 2018 meeting. Those were sent to you earlier for your review and posted to board docs.
Need a motion?
Second.
It's been moved by Dr. Sapini and seconded by Mr. Barlow. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing that we have none, the minutes will be received as corrected. Next item.
The next item is item 2, the recognitions. We have several recognitions this evening, Madam Chair. goes to Tomorrow's Hope participants. Tomorrow's Hope is a new exhibit at the Black History Museum, and RPS had the artwork of 29 students selected to be on display in this exhibit during the month of May. This evening, Richmond Public Schools would like to recognize those students. As your name is called, please come forward to receive your certificate. If there are family members or friends present, please stand to be acknowledged as your child is called. And we also ask that the principal or any staff members from the school present to stand. The first certificate is for Aaliyah Williams at Henderson Middle School. Amaris Davis, Benford Middle School. Brandon Williams, Benford Middle School. Do you want to come on? Brian Lightfoot, Woodville Elementary School. Cameron Collingwood, Mary Munford Elementary School. Charlotte White, Westover Hills Elementary School. Dylan Cool, Fox Elementary School. Giselle Flores Lopez, Green Elementary School. Lorna Fisher, Franklin Military Academy. Jamari Jones, Benford Middle School. Jalissa Walton, George Wood High School. James Antonio Alvaro, Reed Elementary School. Janiyah Patterson, Benford Middle School. Jason Fowler, Benford Middle School. Josiah Moore, Benford Middle School. Kalia Brown, Carver Elementary School. Kamani Mason, Fisher Elementary School. Marlene Tobar, Miles Jones Elementary School. Samaya Cruz, Chimborazo Elementary School. Sinai Fox, Overby Shepherd Elementary School. Soraya Crawley, Benford Middle School. Serenity Gully, Cary Elementary School. Stephen DeBay, John Marshall High School. Simone Hutchinson, Stuart Elementary School. Recognition this evening goes to the Benford Lady Lions. And during the 2017-2018 school year, these young ladies won the middle school regular season and were the tournament champions. Their record this year for the regular season was 8-0, the playoffs 3-0, with the final record of 11-0. So congratulations. Sarah Smith. Jasmine Bellamy. Sienna Freeman. Precious Sales. Shanasia Fells. Head coach Jeff Gunther. Assistant coach Jeff Burns. Scorekeeper Jermaine Booker. And scorekeeper Jerron Benjamin. Our next recognition goes to RPS Shines, which is a new recognition recognition program created to shine a spotlight on the Richmond Public Schools students, educators, and support staff and employees who work hard every day to strive for educational excellence in RPS. Mr. Cameron.
We're going to begin with our Student of the Month. This young man demonstrates all three RPS core elements of resilience, pride, and success at Albert Hill. His math teacher, Ilana Patricia, who nominated him for the award, has especially seen his resiliency on display in her class. He has worked hard this year to develop his study habits, and he has become a much stronger and more successful student as a result of his effort. He also shows pride in his school by being kind to others, being honest, and going the extra mile. Quote, "He is a wonderful citizen of Albert Hill," Ms. Patricia said. "He is an asset to his community of friends and teachers, and is a friend to all." Please join me in recognizing Makai Riley from Albert Hill Middle School.
RPS Shines May 2018 winner for the Educator of the Month, April Dawn Julian. Ms. Julian employs sensory and mindfulness techniques throughout the day to help empower her students to self-regulate their emotions and behavior. Her use of trauma-informed strategies and relationship building with her students creates a connection for them to truly engage with the high-quality instruction she delivers. For an example, through a classroom grant, Ms. Julian purchased an aquaponic tank to allow the class to grow vegetables. Ms. Julian is a master teacher, said one of her fellow educators and nominated her. "I love going into her classroom. She works hard to challenge her students, and I have seen them flourish in her care." We'd like to congratulate Educator of the Month, Ms. April Dawn Julian.
Fairfield Court. Fairfield Court. By the way, I got to eat the vegetables and they were very good.
Yes, Fairfield Court. I apologize for omitting the school. Fairfield Court Elementary School.
All right, and for our support staff member of the month, this individual has made a huge impact on so many RPS families who speak Spanish as their first language. Her dedication to her community and passion for her work is evident from the numerous nominations she received. She has visited families in the hospital, attended funerals, helped families find counseling and legal representation, all in addition to helping ensure that all RPS students have access to a high-quality education no matter what their first language may be. Quote, she is involved in the community, which allows her to deeply understand the needs and locate the right resources, said one nominator. She is always kind, friendly, and efficient with our requests for assistance. And unfortunately, she couldn't be here this evening because she's ill, but please join me in recognizing Fanti Polanco, who is with the Bilingual Community and Parent Liaison at the Welcome Center for the Office of Family and Community Engagement. Please join me in congratulating Fanti.
Before we move to our final recognition, I understand we have two students who had artwork shown to come in this evening. Tiaja Wright. Next item is item 3, and that is to recess your board meeting and convene a public hearing. 3.01, to see public comment on the renaming of Jeff E. Stuart Elementary School. Motion carried, Madam Chair, on time.
We can go right into the public hearing. And if someone is here to speak on the renaming of Jeff Stewart, you have 2 minutes. And when you come forward, please state your name and sign in. And this is the public hearing regarding the renaming of Jeff Stewart.
Good evening. RPS Board and members of the community. My name is Wanda Stallings, and I'm here to support renaming this school, which I haven't been in 50 years plus, in the name of Judge William H. Douglas. I did a statement and letter to the press about 2 years ago as to why this gentleman has been overlooked. Judge Douglas was the first black elected judge. He lives here in the north side. I guess people are asking, well, why isn't he here with his family? Judge Douglas right now is dealing with some health issues, and his wife and his children are taking care of him. We live right across the street, from Lucille Brown School. Has been named after her. Judge Marsh and his brother, they were given the courthouse. Oliver Hill, who's got a bus on 3rd Street. He's got a street named after him. He's already got a courthouse named after him. I mean, come on. We all live together. I understand that only Hill Young Theater right now they're running the same new building, which is the first, I think, of Maggie Walker. So I have a vested interest in the city, in Jackson Ward, and in the school system. We have donated quite a bit to RPS as far as history goes with all the historical buildings that I have and my family have renovated and
30 seconds.
I feel that Judge Douglas deserves this recognition. I believe on the last meeting, you all given a packet of his accolades as to why he should be named. I feel it's an honor that should be so personal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Do we have any others in audience that would like to come before the board is speaking this time? Seeing that we have none, this concludes the public hearing for the renaming of Jeff Stewart. Next item.
The next item is item 5, public information, and I have no speakers who signed up in advance. Please declare, Madam Chair.
We have members of an audience to come forward at this time. You have 3 minutes. If you're speaking as an individual, if you're speaking on behalf of an organization, you have 5 minutes. And remember, this is public information period. This is not related to the renaming of Jeff Stewart. As you come forward, state your name and sign in.
Good evening, Susan Hawes, speaking for myself. When I came this evening, I was not expecting what I heard, which is an update on Summerhill. Since I haven't heard anything about Summerhill, I'm curious as to how we're going to have an update. The rumors that I'm hearing are that Summerhill is being closed. And all I can do is shake my head. After all the time to make that school the community that it is. And where are they going to go? Because a lot of them were kicked out of their schools because of overcrowding. The classrooms were desperately needed because of the overcrowding on South Side. So now where are they going to go? I just cannot begin to explain to you how upset and disappointed I am that this is being done behind the scenes. And I am dumbfounded. And it's not often I'm speechless. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other members in the audience that would like to come forward at this time? Seeing that we have none, this concludes the public information period. Next item.
The next item is item 6, board business, 6.01, provide a report on the 100-day plan. It has been posted to the board docs. I don't have a copy.
I will be brief. Enclosed in the plan are the dates and additional detailed information about each of the items from the 100-day plan. I will say that it was an extraordinary experience, and I'm grateful to everybody who helped make the plan possible, in particular so many members of the family and community engagement team that enabled us to have so many meetings out in the community almost every night during that 100 days, many of which I'm hoping to continue over time. I also want to thank all of the board members for hosting the town halls and for participating in a number of other events throughout the 100 days. And I thought I would just very briefly share just one highlight from each of the 3 sections, beginning with engagement. I think one of the most powerful experiences during that time was the living room chats, the conversations with families that I was able to hold on Friday evenings in their homes. I think it just speaks to the power of relationships and how important it is that we as a school division do even more to go to our families and not just ask our families to come to us. And so as we think about going forward over the next several years, I definitely want us to be thinking and planning to figure out how we ensure that our educators, our administrators, our support staff are able to spend more time in our communities to develop those relationships. Second, on the equity front, I think one of the experiences that most stands out for me is the walk with the board of the Richmond Slave Trail. It was an incredibly powerful experience that connected our past with our present. And not only was it educational and illuminating and moving, but I also thought it was a wonderful experience for the board and our families to develop additional relationships, which I think have helped us as we continue to move forward. And then finally, on the excellence end, I just have to give a nod to the RPS Shine. So we just were able to recognize our first Educator of the Month, Support Staff Member of the Month, and Student of the Month. I think they represent the best of what RPS is, and we have many, many more folks throughout the district that we are eager and excited to recognize through RPS Shines over the coming months and years. I had the good fortune of being able to personally deliver those recognitions at schools, and it just shows us once again that we can never say thank you enough to our amazing kids, our amazing educators, and certainly our support staff throughout RPS. So thank you to everyone, and as I noted, this includes all of the relevant information, and certainly glad to take questions or proceed as the chair would like.
Mr. Young?
Well, just briefly, the superintendent's a man of his word, and 100 days in, he did what he said he was going to do, and I think that he set the bar right where it should be, and look forward to even bigger and more grander things.
Mr. Barlow?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know it's a pretty daunting experience to come into a community and to take the helm of our school district, and I think that Mr. Cameron, you've done an excellent job of reaching out to the community and getting folks involved and making your presence known, and that's very clearly reflected in this 100-day plan final report. So thanks for all your efforts.
Thank you.
I would just like to add to the 100-day plan, I guess the biggest takeaway, or one of the biggest takeaways, is community engagement, the living room chats, connecting with families that so often have felt like they have no voice, but taking the time to, to build those relationships. So, for me, that was one of the biggest takeaways, the living room chats. Going into various communities, regardless where in the city, talking to parents, community members, and students of RPS. I think that was very meaningful. And like I said, that was one of the biggest takeaways. Ms. Burke?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Cameron's job well done. As I walk around the community and go into the settings, it's very evident that you've been quite transparent. And we thank you so much for that, because the conversation is right now. You know where we've been, look where we're going. So thank you so much for completing this in 100 days. You're a man of your word. Thank you so very much, job well done.
Thank you.
Next item.
The next item is item 7, administration business, 7.01, receive an update on the cost to rename Stuart Elementary School. It is posted to board docs.
That's right. So I believe there are hard copies too, so if we hold for 1 second. Thank you, sir. So very briefly, these are all estimates, and I want to thank publicly Ms. Timmons for her work in identifying these elements. There are a number of items that would need to be addressed. So first is the wooden sign in front of the school, an estimate of $2,500. The need for a new marquee, again at $2,500, and those prices can go much higher as well if you get the Cadillac of marquees, but this was the base price. There's a bronze plaque, which my understanding is would need to be replaced. I think the largest potential cost is, for folks who are familiar with the school, on the front facade, it actually says J.E.B. Stuart etched in stone. So I think one of the questions that we would need to consider is whether that should remain for historical purposes or to be covered up. That would be the most expensive item, and we'd need to address with an architect, potentially engineer, to figure out what's the best way to do that. So again, that's a minimum cost estimate. Then floor mats, rubber mats, stationery envelopes, business cards, that sort of thing, pens, pencils, and other branded office supplies for kids and for staff, t-shirts for students and staff, and banners for the school to announce and celebrate the new name, whatever it is. So these are estimates, fairly conservative. Obviously, things can always be expanded as is necessary, but with the big caveat of the stone facade, this is a rough estimate of what the cost would be.
Any questions? Ms. Burke?
In regards to the estimated cost, thank you so much. So far as software or other, would that automatically be included in the overall budget, or would that be additional since names will all have to be changed for anything that we utilize, the technology piece?
Yeah, it's a little bit awkward. You mean in terms of the name that software is registered in?
Just everything technology-wise, period. With all that, the school number will still be the same, though.
Right, yeah. We'll do some additional investigation on if there's anything specific to technology that would need to be addressed.
Thank you.
I will also add that I would imagine that there are members or organizations or businesses in the Northside community that might be willing to sponsor some of these things, particularly t-shirts and banners and things of that nature. So I think we should consider whether this is necessarily needs to be all publicly funded.
So just want to remind everyone that the next public hearing for the renaming of Jeff Stuart will take place on June 4th, 17th floor in the school boardroom. So remember, the next public hearing is scheduled for June 4th, 17th floor, City Hall. Next item.
The next item is 7.02, receive an update on the strategic planning process.
So I have a updated bit of information on our progress so far, hot off the presses. So first, all of our principals have begun to plan and implement staff and family visioning sessions, just like the ones that we did together as a board. That will be taking place between May 15th and June 15th. So far, we've already had staff visioning sessions at Albert Hill, Red, Oak Grove, Franklin Military, Community, Cary, Stuart, Ginner Park, and Southampton will be completed by the end of today. Third, community vision meetings. The first community vision meeting for families was held Thursday, May 17th at Albert Hill. It was facilitated by Dr. Harris and Mrs. Melinda Lawson, who is a 8th grade teacher at Hill. Full of really great conversation and positive feedback, and we are excited to have a partner in the teacher from this Hill co-lead, and so that's something that we're hoping to replicate going forward. We have central office visioning meetings. 2 of them have already been scheduled, and stakeholder visioning meetings are being scheduled. VCU is holding a higher education visioning meeting. Richmond Hill is hiring a faith-based meeting. The Federal Reserve Bank is hosting a business visioning meeting, and Harrell and Chambliss is hosting the Civil Rights Visioning Meeting. We also have district visioning meetings set. Unfortunately, we had one that was needed to be rescheduled due to inclement weather. And then finally, of course, we have the website where folks are encouraged to sign on and share their thoughts and dreams. And individuals can do that, and groups can do that as well. And again, I want to encourage folks in your families, in your faith organizations, in your businesses, in your community centers to take time to go onto the website and share your dreams, rvaschools.net. Thank you.
Ms. Dorr?
I apologize if I've missed this, but would it be possible to get a public schedule of all the upcoming meetings?
Yes, it'll all be put on the website this week.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Next item.
The next item is 7.03, receive an update on water testing.
Good evening, Board. I would like to provide an update on the water testing currently underway in RPS. In 2017, the Virginia Assembly passed legislation requiring schools to implement a plan to test all local water in buildings. The legislation directs school divisions to use EPA guidelines, which require the testing of all drinking fountains and the remediation of those that have levels more than 20 parts per billion per 200 cubic meters sample. RPS is in compliance with the legislation and has actually set a higher bar by implementing a plan to test all fountains and sinks in our schools. We're also remediating sources that are either above 15 parts per billion in our schools. It's important to note that RPS recently received a grant to replace some water fountains with hydration stations, which allow students to fill water bottles. Removal of fountains to install these stations is not a sign of elevated lead in those systems. It's part of a separate initiative. Slide 3 provides an overview of RPS's current testing protocol. First, in order to test, a building's water supply must idle for 8 to 18 hours. Once idle, our testing vendor goes to the building to test each fixture. Once test results are returned to RPS, any fixture with levels above 15 parts per billion is immediately taken out of service. If an initial test on an idle fixture shows elevated levels, we schedule a follow-up test. And during the second test, if the idle fixture is flushed for 30 seconds and retested, if the fixture still reads above 15 parts per billion, it's already taken offline. Fixtures that read under after the flush test are temporarily returned to service and scheduled for replacement. To date, RPS has completed water testing at 21 sites. We prioritize testing at buildings built prior to 1986, and will complete this group by July 2018. RPS plans to test buildings constructed after 1986, immediately after testing our priority group. To date, 5 fountains and 46 sinks have shown elevated levels above 15 parts per billion. All of these sinks and fountains have been removed from service. School-wide school data is available on the following slides and will be available on the RPS website tomorrow. By the start of the 2018 school year, RPS will replace all drinking fountains with elevated levels, all sinks with elevated levels, and all fixtures that require a flush. In terms of next steps, City Council has a pending ordinance to provide $1 million for the remediation of lead, and this will be voted on at the end of May.
Any questions? Ms. Cosby?
2 questions. Blackwell, when was that built? When was Blackwell built?
And I would be sure I feel back here.
It's in the 90s. 96-ish.
Two questions. I know it's only 2%, but it's still 5 sinks. And if I were a parent sending my kid to a school, I would be concerned with one sink too many is one sink too many. So my question is, what is your recommendation for the schools that we haven't yet tested? What should we be doing, because we don't have accurate information? And I personally, as a parent, wouldn't want my kid drinking out of a water fountain at that school that we haven't tested.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you as a parent of a child who's joining RPS. I get that. Right now, everything's on the table. We're talking about, there are certain things that districts around the country are doing to remediate this. Some propose flushing daily at those sites to clear the pipes. We're cleaning out the aerators in the sinks, or we're cleaning out sediment there. We talked about trying to get water coolers and water for those schools. We're trying to put together the best possible plan for those schools and also expeditiously work remaining less so that we can address these issues.
So that leads to my second question. I think it's important that I know we're having this public meeting, but obviously not everyone attends these meetings, so I think it's important that we get this information out to parents, to the public. And two, I believe the GA legislation also included a requirement to have the information publicly available. So to that end, I think it's just a good best practice to keep this information on our website moving forward.
Ms. Burke? Ms. Owen?
Elkhart Thompson, I don't believe was built in 1941. I think the old Elkhart was built in 1941. The current school, I think is newer than that. Pretty sure.
We'll get that.
Mr. Ball?
Thank you. I also have a school-specific concern, and that's with regard to Carver Elementary. I'm of course concerned that we haven't been able to test all of our schools yet, and I'm glad that we're undertaking a process to do so. I think when you get to Carver, you'll realize that there isn't much to test. They have had a lot of water fountains removed from the school, and they haven't been replaced, so I'd certainly encourage any effort to replace these water fountains or water stations or whatever we need to put in there, because there really only are 1 or 2 for the whole student population.
Question.
Yes.
So going back to Blackwell, and looking at this information in comparison to Woodville and Reed, as far as the number of sinks that has been impacted. So this is in the big building, this is not in the pre-K center, correct?
Yes, I believe so. I have to double check that.
I see Summer Hill Preschool and Mary Scott. So this is, okay, the big deal. And so what is, and I may be repeating the question, but what was the remedy for the sinks again, replacing the sinks?
Yeah, the sink are being tied in the first test, was taken out of service, and then a scheduled test, a follow-up test scheduled. In the follow-up test, they'll flush the picture every second and retest.
How often are we planning to test?
Yeah, I think the guidance is every 3 years.
Is that best practices, timeline for best practices, based on best practices?
We can certainly benchmark against what other districts are doing. I think the EEO guidance is every 3 years.
Can we look at,
Being more aggressive.
yes,
Yeah.
and what other school districts, how are they addressing this issue?
Absolutely.
Because I think personally, being a parent. 3 years is too long to do periodic testing. Next item. Thank you.
The next item is 7.04, receive an update on the budget and equity audits.
Thank you. This is in response to the board's request for an overview of each of these audit processes. So very quickly, first on the budget side, as I have shared, this audit will be conducted by the Council of Great City Schools, which I think most of the board recognizes, but for the public is a coalition of about 70 of the nation's largest urban public school districts. They have convened a team of former and current senior managers with extensive experience in finance and budget to conduct their review. They will be looking specifically at budget expenditures, operational practices, including accounting, budget, business systems, payroll, purchasing, and organizational structures as well, including spans of control and alignment of functions. The audit will take place June 5th to 8th. They will be on site to review documents, conduct interviews, etc. The cost is $25,000, which is a little bit less than we had previously estimated, including the 4 days on site. And as I've shared previously, this cost will be borne by the private funds raised by the Education Fund. Madam Chair, do you want to take questions on each or go through both and then take questions?
Take questions on each.
Okay.
Any questions regarding the budget audit? Ms. Gibson?
Thank you for this overview. Regarding to the budget audit, I was wondering, given that we're under the memorandum of understanding, how will as the state is looking at our budget expenses and either approving them or denying them, I suppose, do we have a solid understanding of what those credentials are, and will that be applied as well to the review as this third party is auditing?
Help me, I didn't quite understand when you said credentials. Can you help me understand that?
Whatever the requirements are, or the criteria, I suppose, that the OSI is using to
make those determinations.
Right.
Got it. We will. That's a good point. We will make sure that that information is transmitted to the council so that when they're doing that analysis, they can take that into consideration. It also makes me think, as they're reviewing our processes, we need to make sure that they're taking into account the extra steps that are required by the MOU as well. So yes, we'll do that. Thank you.
That was my other question. Thank you.
Okay, moving right along. Ms. Cosby?
And when do we expect to receive the full report after? Because I just see here June 5th through the 8th for the audit.
Yes, my understanding is it takes a couple of weeks, and so my expectation would be by July. Again, the idea is that we would have that as part of the strategic planning conversation. But we will circle back to the board with a more concrete date for you.
Moving right along with the equity audit.
So for that, we've selected the Education Trust, which is a nationally recognized organization working on behalf of educational equity. In an effort to help us ensure that we have the initial phases of this work ready for discussion as part of the strategic planning process, we've broken this up into 2 phases. So phase 1 will be looking at data and some on-site interviews as well, my understanding is. Focused largely on academic achievement. So that is how students are performing, academic opportunity, that is what access our students have to what kinds of coursework, academic rigor, teacher qualifications, culture and climate, and funding. And the analysis will look at inequities between schools and within schools, as well as by race, ethnicity, income level, students with disabilities, and English language learners. That's phase one, with, again, we'll get a more concrete date for you, but concluding by July. The cost is $30,000, including up to 5 days on site to do document review and interviews. Again, that's paid for by the Education Fund. We would like to also do a second phase, which really can only happen until next school year. It's a more qualitative review, actually looking at instructional practices, materials, and interventions, and so on. But that requires folks to be in schools and talking with teachers and things of that nature, which obviously, given testing and the end of the school year, can't be done at this point. And it's also more labor intensive. So we have asked them to explore what that might look like, what the cost would be, and then we'll make a determination as to whether we proceed with that phase two.
Ms. Gibson.
Just one question or thought is, in this first phase, if we could also include staff compensation in the equation, and with both this and the equity audit, or in the budget audit, it would be really great to see examples of these past audits that these partners have done, perhaps from similar school systems, sure, just so we can see sure, an example.
Glad to provide that. And to include the compensation piece.
Next item.
The next item is 7.05, receive an update on Summer Hill.
So this is a brief update. As many of you know, we have received a number of concerns from staff and families about the physical condition of the facility. And so as a result of that, we have begun the process of thinking through if there ought to be a different plan for next school year. We have scheduled for this Wednesday, the chair and I will be meeting with the staff at Summer Hill to hear directly from them, to get their perspective on what has occurred. And there's a host of options on the table, from reinvestment to transferring the program to another site. We have already invested significant funds into the rehabilitation of the site, but our understanding is it still suffers from some significant deficiencies that are still making it difficult for educators and certainly kids to have as positive an experience as we would like. So again, the next step is to meet with folks on Wednesday to get their perspective, and then I would come back to the board with a formal recommendation at the June 4th meeting.
Thank you, Superintendent Cameron, for the information, for providing the board the information. I know many of you have heard me express my concerns regarding Summer Hill, regarding the many calls that I received from parents as well as staff. We closed the building in 2012 because of a lot of the issues that I have received calls about: the roof leaking, the boiler, the HVAC. So we just continuously keep putting a Band-Aid over not to be too graphic, cancer. And the more we keep trying to fix or cure the issue, it spreads and it just keeps getting worse. So thank you for providing the board information regarding Summer Hill. And I look forward to our meeting with the staff on Wednesday and look forward to additional information going forward.
I have a question.
Ms. Cosby?
Comments. One, in addition to speaking with the staff, will there be opportunities to talk to parents as well? I guess my concern is that we're at the end of the school year, and that's just a lot of angst for people to have to make other arrangements. I mean, I don't know what the final recommendations will be. So one, talk to parents, and I hope that will be in the report, conversations with parents and findings. And second, any type of cost associated with remediation of these issues, if they can be fixed. So that's what I would like to see included in that report.
If I could just add on the parent issue, my understanding is since it is a one-year program, the parents it would affect are the ones that are enrolling their kids for preschool next year. I would need to check this, but my understanding is not all of them have been told yet which preschool center that, right, so, but the larger point about engagement with families certainly is a good one.
Ms. Owen?
Well, I'm sorry, this is the first I've heard that. Preschool is not in my school. Go to the school. So I care very deeply about them. I remember being at the school board meeting when the school board was basically presented in the difficulty when they decided to move everybody to something over the last minute. And the school board really had no recourse, and that better not happen here. They need to be fully informed going forward. The parents were devastated then because it was very last minute, and they had planned to send their children to the school where they had been going, where their older brothers and sisters went. And when the change was made in August, transportation was not provided from home, but only from that school. So there were a lot of children in my district who did not go to preschool because they didn't have any way to get their 4-year-old to the host school to get on a bus, because they couldn't ride a bus with a big sister because the timing didn't work. Some of you heard me talk about this before. So this is a big issue for families who have older children and also 4-year-olds coming along. It's a big issue for all of us with transportation, again. So I look forward to being fully informed going forward and having plenty of time for all of us to consider the ramifications of this.
Ms. Gibson?
Yes, I share some of the other concerns with the last minute. This feels, I want to ensure, I know that last year when there was discussion about George Mason, that it gave folks some anxiety, and we just want to make sure that as we are working to rebuild trust, that it's really just about communication and doing things in a timely way. I wanted to follow up on Linda's note. So in addition to getting the costs that Felicia had requested, which I think would be helpful to see, I also think it would be helpful to look at the history in terms of attendance levels at the preschools that families were sending kids, and now just to see how having the Summer Hill building has impacted attendance in the preschool program.
Just to add to that, as a board representative for Summer Hill, I appreciate my colleagues' comments regarding the many issues that are before us, and those have been my concerns. The cost, what has been expended on Summer Hill to date, what is the anticipated cost to bring it up to standards, acceptable standards for our children. And yes, I remember when, like I said, the building was closed, surplus in 2012. All of a sudden in 2016, the previous board reopened the building, short notice. So I will not advocate for the same steps to happen. I want our parents to be fully informed. And I'm a huge advocate on behalf of our parents. So I want our parents and the community to be fully informed. And I want the community and the parents to be fully informed about the cost and the conditions of that building. And is that building good enough for our babies to be in? Because those were some of the reasons why the building was closed in 2012. If you could not take your child to Summer Hill, then why is it good enough for our other children? So I look forward to the information, because we're already faced with limited funds as far as maintenance and repairs for all of our buildings. And is that the best use of public dollars? But again, our children deserve to be learning in an environment that's conducive for learning. And I'm not going to accept anything else, and I don't think we as a board should accept anything less than that. So thank you. Next item.
The next item is item 8, budgetary items. 8.01, received a fiscal year 19 budget recommendation and 2019 through 2023 CIP budget update.
Thank you. I want to clarify, this is actually a recommendation focused squarely on the use of the appropriated fund balance, which is distinct from the entire budget, which, as has been widely reported, did not increase in terms of operating revenue. And so, again, this presentation is just for the board to consider the use of that $12.47 million that was reappropriated from the fund balance back to the division. This should look relatively familiar to everyone, as it reflects discussions we've had for some time now. On slide 2 is just a summary. 3 basic categories: salary and benefits at $5.1 million, additional staff at $865,000, and then a host of other expenditures that we have discussed over a number of discussions at about $6.5 million. If we turn to slide 3, it has the specifics. So first, on salaries and benefits, I'm recommending that we use $3.8 million for a 2% raise for all contracted employees, along with $1.8 million for the increased cost of healthcare. As we discussed previously, that is higher than we initially anticipated. It was originally at $1.2 million, now at $1.8. And as we have discussed, there's somewhat of a savings from the decrease in the BRS rate, bringing the total increase for salaries and benefits at $5.1 million. On the staffing side, I am recommending that we preserve our investments in ESL and bilingual staff, so 5 additional ESL teachers, 9 bilingual support staff, and 3 bilingual counselors. Additionally, I'm recommending that we move forward with the addition of 12 nurses, 1 internal auditor, and as we've discussed, a 20 FTE reduction of non-instructional staff, and that nets out at $865,000. Then finally, on the last slide, I'm recommending preserving $50,000 for each of the 3 pilot programs, the living room chats, the trauma-informed care practices, and restorative justice practices, so that we can begin to take some forward movement on those. I want to just clarify that we have some good work going on in the district in each of these areas, and so I would like to be able to use this money to help us figure out how to scale some of that good work. Then $250,000 for athletic equipment, which is half our original $500,000. Maintaining a 10% increase in bus driver and monitor salaries to help us compete more effectively for those individuals. Athletic trainers contract and a contract for dedicated nurses for students with disabilities. Last 3 items, transfers, as we have discussed, for Patrick Henry, RCEEA, Code RVA, Maggie Walker, Appomattox, and a matching investment on early intervention reading. Then we had discussed earlier the potential of paying off a legacy retirement program. I am recommending that we not do that, and at least for next year we continue to make the annual payment, which would be $395,122. And then, as you recall from the famed yellow highlight sheet, there are these specific education programs. These items are actually already committed for the Arthur Ashe Center, Virtual Virginia, and another set of items, which totals out at about $3.7 million. All of these expenditures total to $6.5 million, and then again, back to that slide 2, it provides the summary for a total of $12,470,800.
Mr. Young?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In regards to retirement, and for the benefit of the public, along with my colleague, can the superintendent remind us what that aggregate dollar figure is? It's approximately $4 million.
Yes, hold on 1 second. $3,390,273.
Mr. Young? Mr. Barlow?
I'd be delighted to hear what Mr. Young has to say before I respond.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow. I'll weigh in. This is an inquiry, but instead my assessment, and I had an opportunity to converse with I think just most of the persons on this stage about it. But my concern pertains to spending what you characterize as one-time dollars, and these are fund balance or surplus dollars, they describe dollars that I think move. I have some reservation, a serious reservation about using it for recurring expenditures, specifically those kinds of costs that you can anticipate in year 2, year 3, 4 of the budget. I want to remind us we're not voting on this evening, so what I shared next has some relevance, but specifically I intend to our next meeting, presumably when we do consider this for action, an alternative approach, and specifically that we would use surplus dollars to fund 2 priorities. One would regard what we just discussed, that unfunded liability, making sure our teachers are whole, i.e. that approximately $3.4 million is addressed in full and done as soon as very possible, and we can do that sooner rather than later. And the second is something that we just spent some considerable time discussing, and that pertains to facilities and something we've all been in, i.e. the condition of our infrastructure. And so it seems to me that as a group, if we are going to regularly lament the condition of our buildings, and we should, because of the condition there too. We should put our money where our mouth is, and we should use at least some of the surplus dollars for that purpose. So I look forward to our next meeting introducing a proposal for my colleagues' consideration that would allocate 3/4 or 75% of those surplus dollars or fund balance money to facilities for maintenance, and then the balance of 25% to what I would characterize as an unfunded liability, or this gap in between where we're at and what we owe our teachers. So with that, Madam Chair, thank you for indulging.
Mr. Barlow?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm still disheartened by how this budget came about, or what the end product was at the very least. It seems to me that we're being put in a situation where we have priorities that we need to fund. There's no question to me that we need additional resources put into what should be recurring expenses, and that includes salary increases for our staff, our teachers, certainly the ESL and bilingual support staff, the nurses. And what I'm worried about is what a showdown looks like next year when we put all of these one-time funds that we've been given into expenses that need to be put into, or that putting these one-time expenses into line items that would otherwise be recurring expenses. Because we could find ourselves in a situation next year where they do the same thing. And what I'm worried about is a showdown next year where we get a very similar result, and then we find ourselves having to make millions in cuts to our budget, where we've put in additional teachers and support staff, and then the next year we have to cut them, or we have to find other things to cut. So I'm not endorsing Mr. Young's position at this point, because I do think that we have critical staffing needs. But I do think it's something that we have to think long and hard about, because next year the mayor and council can come back and raise our budget, and then they could raise it by $5 million. And I mean, last year we saw a situation where our net increase was a couple $1 million, and everyone walked around town saying it was some historic improvement. And next year we could receive less funding, and they can still make an argument if they're up to their up to political gamesmanship, where they're increasing our budget again. So I'm just really worried about this, and I think there was a fair amount of discussion in the public when we were going through the budget process. But we need to keep noting this, because we are less than a year away from our next budget discussions with City Council. And I don't want our hands being forced into a situation where we have to start cutting into the bone. We've seen that happen too many times in the school district.
Ms. Burke?
I'm thinking back to the retirement banquet the other night. I can't recall right now the number of persons that we had to retire, from teachers to specialists to administrators, bus drivers, instructional assistants. There, as it always has been, a number of persons, when they get a certain age, you have a certain amount of years to move on. May I ask Mr. Campbell, pretty much the number that you recall?
Of retirees?
Yes.
Not off the top of my head, but we could certainly check.
It was a good number, which it always is. Yeah. So I'm just also thinking in terms of what's expected with the turnover. So in my mind, as persons, we have to continue the cycle. So we can't hold ourselves in one position that we're going to end up with a group of teachers, because this number that you have listed here is not great at all. I'm really disappointed, because I don't see the gift of the talent in here. A couple of other areas, but I know we don't have money for that. So my point is, let's be mindful also that there is a consistent turnover. We want to keep the teachers that we have and the support persons that we have, but we also need to be mindful of meeting the needs of our children and being mindful of that expected turnover cost-wise. Thank you.
Ms. Gibson?
Following up on the turnover point, actually, it took me to reiterate, we're torn, right? Because it seems risky to put money towards recurring expenses and not have the guarantee for next year. Likewise, it feels risky not to specifically fund the staff piece where it could cause us to lose teachers. And so, so we're in a difficult spot. One piece that I'd like to investigate is the fund balance itself. And I'm wondering, and I don't know if this would make sense or could be included in our budget audit that we're working on folks with, or if our current finance team might be able to explore it. But I guess what I'd like to know is, was the current staffing for 18 used to set a benchmark for this year? So, with the fund balance, there's different buckets that it could fall in, right? So you've got certain recurring, you've got certain funds that comes through vacancy. The job is no longer open, we're not paying the salary, so we have the savings. Then there might be, I would assume, some funds that come from unspent expenses. And then there's also the bucket of turnover, and as I'm defining turnover, I'm referring to what happens when we have someone who has 20 years of tenure and then leaves the system, perhaps they retire or otherwise, and then we fill that job with someone that has less experience and therefore would be a less expensive hire. And so if we go through the benchmarking process in a year to year, then I understand that that would include that. But I didn't note it in the past couple years of the budgets that I reviewed, and I'm wondering, if we were to not include that, if we consider that a recurring cost. Because I mean, our fund balance is going up quite a bit from year to year, and I think at a minimum it would be very helpful to understand what's driving that fund balance, and if indeed there are certain factors that are driving it that are recurring, could we look at appropriating some of that funding or defining it as recurring revenue that we could put towards something like the 2%. Likewise, I don't know if this is, I think there was something that just came up on my phone at least that spoke to perhaps some movement at the state level, so I think that's something to be hopeful to, that I don't think that impacts this fiscal year, but I'm thankful to see that there is a shred of light in that respect.
Ms. Dorr?
I just have a quick statement, and then I do have a question as well. Echoing a lot of what other folks at the table have said, I am hesitant to support something that is just an example of bad budgeting, and I don't understand. I guess before I would be inclined to and I agree with what Ms. Gibson said earlier, I feel really torn because there are very real needs, and I would hate to also not provide a minimum of a 2% cost of living increase for our teachers. I mean, it's just, we can't, I personally couldn't not do that next year. I guess my statement is I just feel like we need to go to the city council and to the mayor and say, what do you need from us next year to be able to fully incorporate this into your operating budget? Because on the one hand, I don't want to make a bad budgeting decision, but I also don't want to fund some very real needs that we have in here. And then my question is, I believe there were some SOQ requirements on here that are no longer on here, and I think we asked about this last time, but are we going to get in trouble from the state if we don't fully fund the SOQ requirements?
It's an issue, that I've raised with the state, and I didn't get the, well, in essence, we would be out of compliance on some of those elements, but it is unclear what, if any, consequence there would be, given that we're already under a memorandum of understanding. But we raised that at our meeting with the DOE last week.
As it pertains to the SOQ items, it would be really helpful. So if regarding my question with the benchmarking or the baseline, in terms of the turnover savings, that would be really helpful, unless there's someone here that would be able to speak on that now. And likewise on the SOQ piece, because as I was looking through the budget, I was unclear with the line item that we have for gifted, because it appeared that I'm not sure what the state change was that was requiring the additional $800,000 that had been allocated. And then another piece is, if I recall, there was a significant change towards state funding for special education. And I believe it was upwards of $1 million, because some of that funding they had reallocated toward some of the ESL support that we have included in our budget now. And I'm wondering what are implications for our current staffing levels based on the change in the SOQ requirements and the funding that's coming from the state for special education.
We can certainly take a look at all
Ms. Cosby?
Thank you. And in addition to what Ms. Gibson mentioned, is there anything we can, on this list, that we can look at in terms of funding outside the general fund? Where do we stand with school improvement grants? Have we used all of those grants? Have we fulfilled our obligation with that? Well, I was just using school improvement grants. I mean, there could be other grants. My question is this. So for some of these things, I'm not saying, like some of the pilots that we have down here, is there an opportunity to explore funding sources outside of the general fund to support these programs?
Good question. I'm not, my understanding is no, but we will certainly explore that one more time to see if that is possible.
Ms. Ball? Ms. Gibson?
The other question that I have is regarding the current, so we have the additional principal directors that are going to be part of the, reporting into our two schools. And those positions are not yet included in this budget. And so, but I think it's important that as we're debating costs, that they're considered. And so I think that in the next iteration, let's look at that cost too, so that we're looking at that holistically.
The only reason those aren't included is because they're part of a larger reorganization. So as I've shared previously, the reorganization that will take place by the fall will involve likely the creation of a number of new positions, perhaps the combining of positions, and now I'm talking below the cabinet level. As I've committed previously, the net result of that would be no additional cost, and so rather than bringing each one of those changes as they are considered to the board, my plan was to bring a complete package of all of the reorganization changes to demonstrate how it gives us a revenue neutral change. So that's why it's not showing up here as an additional expense, because again, if I take the set of FTEs that are currently central office folks reporting up to the cabinet and make all the necessary adjustments that I feel are required, again, my commitment is that that is revenue neutral, so again, that's why I'm not showing it as an additional cost here that we would need to fund.
Ms. Burke, I'm just asking for this for clarification, maybe it's here, I see it. With the additional, the increase in advanced placement courses for high school, is that included in this, or that's another set of? Is that something else?
We have been able, using existing structures and FTEs, to support most of what we are hoping to achieve. So again, not an additional cost here.
Excellent. Gifted and talented also? Or just the
No.
advanced placement?
No. We do not have the extra gifted and talented positions. And my understanding, Ms. Gibson, is I believe that is driven less by a change in the SOQ, potentially by a increase in the identification of the number of students, but I'll double check that as well.
Okay.
Ms. Gibson?
Yes, and so following up, I think it would be really helpful to see would be a budget to budget year comparison of our administrative costs. And so I hear the overall objective in staying revenue neutral. And so, but as we are looking at, what we do with any savings, I think it's important to consider, what the overall, implication of changes at the staff level. So if we could look at the next meeting, what the cost for our cabinet and those that level below, kind of comparing it budget year this year to budget year last year, so we have an understanding of the overall cost that we'll need to make changes to as we're considering the budget. That would be helpful to see.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, I'm not sure that cabinet and level below cabinet is actually the right number to look at. I think it's all central office, because right now we have, for example, cabinet members that have 13 direct reports. None of my leadership team is going to have 13 direct reports. And so if I were to direct report, 13 people reporting directly to that individual. So if I were to show that line now, probably the line next year is going to be smaller, but then the line below that's going to be bigger. So again, I think what I think I can do is identify all the current FTEs in the central office and that total cost. And again, my commitment is to not exceed that cost as part of the reorganization.
Also, board members, please be reminded, we are scheduled to adopt the budget at our June 4th meeting. So please keep that in mind. Just have a statement, comment. Just listening to my colleagues at this table, it's really sad. In 2018, the same conversations are being discussed that I had in 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, back again, 2017, 2018, we still having the same conversations. When are we going to raise the bar? Expectations. You know, our children, are they not worthy for the appropriate level of funding that they need so that we as a school division can provide the resources and the experience and to keep the best of the best teachers? When is enough is enough. In 2012, recommendations were made to cut below the standards of quality. I said below the standards of quality. Our needs, consistent, well, not really consistent. I guess it was, our needs increased. Look at our school division. Our growing Hispanic families in the South Side. Are we going to deny them of the ESL support? Look at our CIP. Our maintenance and repairs, $30 million. How much was allocated for the CIP? $1.5 million. We're talking about buildings that were erected in 1920s. The problem gets worse and worse because we have not maintained our buildings. Look at your house. How many maintenance and repairs do you do to your home in comparison to our school buildings? Well, we expect our children to come to school each and every day ready to learn. We make promises to fix up a building such as Summer Hill that never came to fruition. When is enough is enough? You know, we all run on your platform. Education is a priority. City council, the mayor, everyone. Education is a priority. When the rubber hits the road, education becomes, it's put in the back seat. When is enough is enough. I know the General Assembly, they may be voting Wednesday on the budget, and if we can encourage our constituents to reach out to the Richmond delegation of the General Assembly to support the House budget, which favors RPS, it's still not enough. But every little bit helps. When is enough going to be enough? Because these conversations are really overwhelming. The same conversation year after year after year. You strategize, and when is enough going to be enough? Ms. Burke.
Having been in Richmond Public Schools for 30-some-odd years in this, and I sincerely, as a parent also, I can feel your passion and your concern. However, it means I'm thinking that, because you're preaching to the choir right now. So the persons that are responsible for giving us the funds, I'm thinking back to what Ms. Stuart said earlier, in regards to having that conversation face to face, and maybe we can set up a retreat or some other type of, I don't want to say a meeting, gathering or whatever, with the mayor and the city council and find out just exactly what's needed. We see it, we're there, these are our children, but apparently the strategies that we're using, or the strategies that's been used in the past, it's not working. When we have parents that come out, children that come out, everyone arguing. I learned so much at this table because we're working with what we are given. We don't have the authority to tax anybody or whatever else. So my suggestion, Madam Chair, so that this conversation does have to stop and does have to take a turn,
So is it a possibility that we can set up maybe during the summer the floor so that when it's next year time for the budget to be placed, it can be hopefully addressed in a certain manner, a different way. I think also it's been in writing, so maybe I shouldn't say that now in terms of what city council expects. But the accountability piece also is there, so you get what you pay for. You get what you pay for, it's as simple as that. We're competing with area schools around us that maybe we're almost neck and neck, but we have other challenges that many have, but not at the level which we have. So my suggestion, so we won't continue this frustration, is to have a heart-to-heart with these, bring us together as one. We have to bring in an outside agency to facilitate it peacefully. I don't think we should be responsible for that or them. But collectively, if we can have the powers that be on this board, as well as you and Dr. Sapina and Mr. Cameron as chairs and superintendent, Dr. Newbill and Mr. Hillary and the mayor, to set, I'm asking for that. Otherwise, this will continue 20 more years down the road. So we said we want to step up, step out, rise up, all the rest. Let's just do it.
So the next compact meeting is May 31st. Right, but I'm just saying, maybe we can start that conversation during the joint compact meeting, because we can discuss that further. Next item.
The next item is item 9, board action items received for action, the student code of responsible ethics.
Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Mr. Cameron, school board members, good evening. The current 2017-2018 standards of student conduct must be revised and approved by the RPS School Board prior to the issuance of the upcoming 2018-2019 school year. The committee process used to revise the document included the following individuals: parent officer, coordinator of student conduct, an elementary, middle, and high school assistant principal, the REA representative, manager of pupil placement, security officer, the assistant superintendent of schools, an exceptional education coordinator, a representative from student and family services, a representative from parent liaisons, a teacher, and a school board attorney. Meetings were held over a 4-month period to ensure that the necessary revisions were in compliance with any state code changes and review for clarity. So tonight I come to you with revisions that have been completed, and the draft is being presented to the school board to receive action for all revisions. So this is the second revision to the prior revisions that were presented to you back on April 7th. So you all should have a copy of the at a glance document. So if you turn to page 4, and that's where we'll start with the additional changes that we had from our previous school board meeting. We'll down at the bottom, dress code, and page 24 refers to the page in our current score document. And the changes that were made there are definitely in red, and the change states, any school dress code enforcement action should minimize potential loss of educational time. Administration and enforcement of the dress code will be gender neutral and consistent, except in cases where the schools require uniforms. Schools may not enact policies with more restrictive or less restrictive dress codes. The additional changes to the dress code policies we currently have that below that, students must wear clothing including both a shirt and pants or skirt or the equivalent, for example, dresses and shorts, as well as shoes. If you flip over to page 5, the next item that was changed as a revision has to do with
bill that was passed in reference to short-term suspensions for students from kindergarten through third grade. And that talks about those students should not be suspended more than 3 days or expelled from attendance unless the offense involves physical harm or threat of physical harm to others, or the local school board or the division superintendent or his designee finds the aggravating circumstances exist as defined by the department. This item we will still be awaiting for clarification from BOE on how that will be implemented for the upcoming school year. The next item for revision is in regards to suspension in excess of 10 days or expulsion, found on page 41 of our current document, and it pertains to a long-term suspension, which is the disciplinary action whereby a student is not permitted to attend school for 11 to 45 school days. So that's a change from our current policy of where long-term suspension is anything from 11 to 364 days. And that concludes the revisions that I have.
Linda?
Okay. And I think this may we had okay. About the dress code, and I was not aware that we were going to act on this evening, but I do have, Ms. Dora and I have put together some further suggestions for changes to the dress code. And I thought there was going to be a committee meeting, but I must have missed that.
We did have one.
Somehow I did. I'm sorry. Mea culpa. But, and so I'm not prepared to vote on this evening. I have not done all my due diligence at this time. Sorry.
I agree with Linda. I think the nod to gender neutral is great, but there's still at least 10 different references to specific clothing items, and only one of them is related to male-specific clothing items, and at least 5 are related to traditionally female clothing items, in particular the shorts, because you literally cannot buy shorts for children that are 2 inches above the knee, and I feel like it's just unnecessary. So anyways, I agree with Ms. Owen, and I won't be prepared to vote on this tonight. I do understand, and I want to appreciate the efforts. I understand that we're going to be doing a more comprehensive score overview in the next year, and I'm glad to see that already parents have become engaged with that, but I just can't vote on it tonight.
So when is our final date?
Well, based on our last school board meeting, all revisions were to be submitted by April 30th. We held our committee meeting following that. We didn't receive any revisions at that time. That's not true. I sent my feedback.
Can I ask, what are we required by statute or regulation to do in terms of timeline, and then what is required in terms of the production of the new document for distribution timeline?
Thank you. Yeah, well, in reference to the time frame, basically once it is approved, we have to have it translated in Spanish, which takes about 3 weeks. And then for that, it takes about 8 weeks for us to actually get the publication completed. So, and the best scenario is if we have it available for our schools and go out on our websites by August the 20th to ensure that schools have it by the first day.
Just to clarify, if we were to delay the vote this evening to, say, the June 4th meeting, we could have an electronic version of it available shortly thereafter. Is that correct? It's the physical copy that would take some more time?
Yes.
So having the electronic version would address the needs of schools being able to understand how things are going to work next year?
Yes.
Okay. So can we say by the end of the week for you to have connected with Ms. Dorr and Ms. Owen, I believe it was, on that particular issue to make sure that those suggestions are incorporated for, oh great, for final review and vote on June 4th.
Okay, I've got those changes, and I can get them there by then.
Does anyone else have any questions, concerns, or additions? Yep.
When revising the dress code, I would like you guys to keep in mind, I can't speak to all schools, but I can say that my school is improperly air conditioned. We have broken window units, and air conditioning is not essential, but I'm sure most of you all have air conditioning in your house and in your offices. It is very crucial to comfort, which best facilitates learning, and if I can't find shorts 2 inches above my knee, then I have to wear pants. If I can't wear flip-flops, then I have to wear tennis shoes. And I can't find a tank top that's 3 inches wide, so I have to wear a short sleeve shirt. And that just kind of increases the heat into a school building that is improperly air conditioned.
I noticed camera superintendent cameras asked about the timeline. Is there ample time expanded that we can go back and look at this revisit?
Yes, I believe we'll have time to,
Well, it's still an item, so definitely if they have information that they would like for us to take into consideration into another meeting and discuss rather than make a so bad.
So, Woman, please send your input by the end of the week.
well, if I could clarify, I certainly heard energy around the dress code, and it seems like there were some conversations that were already occurring on that, and so I want to make sure that the administration has time to fully capture the vision of the board. I did not hear any energy on other issues, and I'm wary of opening up the entire score to further revision at this point, given how late we are in the process. So unless I hear any other key concerns at this point, I would ask the board's grace and focus it on the dress code. However, if there are significant concerns, I would ask to hear them now, just so we have a chance to identify the scope of those concerns.
So dress code it is. Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Dawn.
Thank you.
Next item.
The next item is 9.02, receive for action recommendation to authorize the superintendent to make budget transfers to balance all accounts for fiscal year 2017-18.
Good evening. Superintendent respectfully requests authorization from the school board to approve budget transfers for year-end closing for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2018. Approval of this request will allow the superintendent to approve budgetary transfers so the division is able to close out the year and pay obligations in a timely manner. An accounting of transfers will be presented to the board after accounts payable will be closed this process.
Any motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm a little unclear. Can you just clarify why we would have to approve these preemptively versus seeing them and then approving?
Yeah, I think it's mainly for expediency. I know there are a number of issues in transportation. We need to move money very quickly in order to pay off our obligations.
Thank you. And do you have any idea of what mean, what kind of numbers we're looking
We can get that.
at?
We
Okay.
can get that now.
So do we need a motion?
Young lady, well, yeah, it's not like what Mr. Barlow was inquiring about. I mean, do we have a ballpark?
Sorry, thank you. 9 quarters is the same as Mr. Barlow. We have a ball, I understand we probably don't have a precise number, but just a ballpark number.
We're pulling it together. I can follow up tomorrow, but I'm just not comfortable giving yeah.
Do we need a motion?
I move that we approve the recommendation of the administration.
Moved by Ms. Owen, probably seconded by Ms. Burke. Any discussion? Ms. Gibson?
I have a bit of a hesitation with this simply because I know there's often quite a few transfers that happen at the end of the year. And I understand the need for urgency, but my personal preference would be to continue the process as it currently exists.
I know we already had some time for questions, but can we get just a little bit more insight into what these budget transfers would look like? It seems like it's likely a run-of-the-mill accounting practice towards the end of the year to get the books in order. But at the same time, if we're seeing big deviations from what was otherwise budgeted, then I'd certainly want to know that if there were any material issues.
If I may just add, we're certainly more than happy to gather up all the information that you've requested. My understanding, though I'm still new to this is standard practice that has been done every school year to enable the administration to do the reconciling of the books at the end of the year. So this is certainly nothing new, merely an expediency. But of course, glad to pull together the information and certainly share all of those transactions as they are made as well.
Yes, as an elementary school principal, principals within their building are given the right to transfer money to balance their budgets. But we do have, when I was a principal, you did have a form which you had to fill in to ask for permission to take that money out of field trips to put in awards for the end of the year, wherever it's needed so that you will balance at the end as expected. So sure that principals can have that right, because that has not changed. We're just asking that the process be approved to balance the budget, correct?
Right, correct.
Please be mindful of that, colleagues. Thank you.
Do we vote? No. I agree with everything Ms. Burke said.
Okay, the motion was made by Ms. Burke, by Ms. Owen, seconded by Ms. Burke, to authorize the superintendent to make budget transfers to balance all accounts for fiscal year 17-18. Ms. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Gibson?
No.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Ms. Cosby? Yes. Mrs. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Dr. Sapini?
Yes.
Mrs. Petty?
It's for the budget, my authority to do budget transfers.
Yes.
The next item is 9.03, receive for action a recommendation regarding plans for a lobby for the 2019 General Assembly session.
Thank you. Per the board's request, we have done a bit of research on other school divisions in Virginia as it pertains to their lobbyists. According to the Virginia Public Access Project, there are 13 school divisions that engage lobbyist services or have a lobbyist on staff in the Commonwealth. Those are Newport News, Norfolk, Fairfax, Hanover, Henrico, Loudoun, Prince William, Arlington, Chesapeake, Chesterfield, Alexandria, and Falls Church. Of those, as best as we can tell, 4 have fully internal on-staff personnel. It looks like roughly, it appears 3 have services with an external lobbyist firm, and the balance, it appears, are working with independent consultants on this. I will say the median annual lobbyist salary is reported to be between, depending upon the jurisdiction, $88,000 and $150,000, just as a bit of benchmarking. Given all this, and given that there's a wide range of approaches to this, my recommendation is that we would apply the $48,000 that is currently being used for the contract for lobbying services towards a position such that this would comprise roughly half the time of a full-time FTE that would be on staff in our Chief Engagement Officer's office that would focus for 50% of that individual's time squarely on lobbying work, with the balance likely on broader advocacy work, which goes beyond strictly lobbying for legislation.
Mr. Young?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm glad we had the opportunity to hear about that plan. I'd like, in light of the fact that we just received that plan, we don't have any written documentation to go along with it. I would like to push this vote to the next meeting. I understand that there was some discussion at the last meeting about our lobbying firm and performance and things of that nature, but my impression was that a proposal was going to be brought forth here, and I certainly hadn't seen the proposal or heard the proposal until just now.
Ms. Crosby?
I'm a bit confused because I thought tonight we were deciding simply because of the timing of the contract, if we were going to go forward with the current lobbyist, and that the superintendent administration would give us a report sometime during our June meetings. So help me understand again, what deadline constraints are we against right now to continue with the current lobbyist that we have?
My understanding is that our current contract is expiring at the end of May. We could certainly bifurcate these two actions, that being whether we could merely vote this evening, and I could make a recommendation on whether to continue that contract, bifurcate that from whether we engage another firm or have an in-house FTE. And to Mr. Bartlow's point, glad to bring back a written proposal on that front at our next meeting. If that is the will of the board, my recommendation would be to not renew the current contract.
We need a motion not to renew the contract, the current contract. Yeah, so one motion is not to renew the current contract.
Madam Chair, I'd like to respectfully request that we push this to the next meeting.
So we have until May 31st to either continue the contract or terminate. So if we want to terminate, we have to make the decision tonight. If we wanted to continue, then
Can we ask
Ms. Lennon?
Okay, I was just going to add, just for clarification purposes, the contract needs to be renewed by May 31st. If you do not take any action, the contract will expire. And so I don't know what posture your motion is going to take, but either you renew it or if no action is taken by that time, it will expire. And then at that point in time, we're looking at another procurement transaction or entertaining the proposal that's on the table that was made by the school.
So Ms. Paula, and then Ms. Dorr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In light of that, I would still like to have further discussion about this at the next meeting. If the contract expires, so be it. But I do think that our legislative advocacy approach could certainly use some revamping, and would like to bring some additional thoughts to the table at the next meeting.
Ms. Dorr. So if we take no action tonight, according to our legal contract, just expired. And then at the June 4th meeting, we would have a discussion about next steps as far as in-house, outside, firm or company, a lobbyist. Okay. Okay. And since we are talking about that, I just want to, if we can put the contact of the Richmond delegation, the General Assembly, contact information on the website, so the public can reach out to the Richmond delegation in support of the House budget.
Yes.
I don't know, moving even beyond that, thank you, moving beyond that, I mean, it's one thing with the contacts, but is there a way that we can do a digital letter so in support of that bill that's on our website, we can click it, it's very easy, and it automatically goes to those delegates. It's not.
I'd like to apologize for the false alarm. We will now reconvene the Richmond City School Board meeting. Madam Clerk.
The next item is 9.04, receive for action, human resources actions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Dr. Sapini, members of the board, Mr. Cameras. In lieu of the one question that was asked earlier this evening, last week we celebrated 116 retirements. So today I put in your chairs the Human Resource Department agenda as well as the addendum for your approval. I give to you the following. Nomination of 50 employees, a change of contract for 53, resignations of 28 employees, return from leave of 3, furlough of 5, and the name change for 3 employees.
I have a question about an employee. Can we talk about it in closed?
Okay.
I just wanted to add that starting at the June 4th meeting, I'll provide an update on vacancies and our progress towards filling those all the way through to the start of the school year.
Next item.
The next item is item 9.05, receive for action school board travel or district activity request. I do have a few requests this evening. Mrs. Page would like to contribute to the 100th anniversary fundraising event that's NAACP held on May 17th. She wants to contribute $700, and Ms. Cosby wants to contribute $500. They sent some students, I believe, to that. Ms. Page also would like to purchase bilingual floor mat, teachers and students, I'm sorry. Ms. Page would also like to contribute $1,000 to Shaw Middle School for the purchase of bilingual floor mats and tote bags, $1,064.96 to Broad Rock Elementary for cafeteria modules, and to Oak Grove Belmead, she would like to contribute $300 for an end of year celebration and $1,080 for books for summer reading. And Blackwell Elementary, Ms. Page would like to contribute $1,032.79 for reading books. The total that Ms. Page is wishing to spend in district activities is $5,177.75, and Ms. Cosby $500.
Need a motion? Ms. Ball.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone for their support for the field day at Carver that we had last week. The bouncy houses, as you might imagine, were a huge hit. And I want to thank Ms. Hudasco and Mrs. Wilson for all their work to get them there. And we also had a ton of volunteers who came out from my workplace to come help out that day, and we had a lot of fun with all the kids there. So thanks a lot for that, and look forward to supporting your expenditures.
I'd like to motion to approve the school board district and activity request.
Second. It's been moved by Ms. Stuart and seconded by Ms. Burke to approve the school board district activity request. Any discussion? Call the question.
Again, the motion was made by Ms. Dorr, seconded by Ms. Burke. Ms. Dorr?
Yes.
Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Abstain.
Ms. Cosby?
Yes.
Ms. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Dr. Sapini? And Ms. Page?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-1. The next item is item 10, new business. All right. Ms.
I was gonna, she gave me the head up to the closed session.
I just want to, not, Ms. Carter, you had,
As always, was making a new business announcement. I just wanted to inform board members and members of our audience and our community that Community of Caring, which is one of our partners, there in all of our Easton elementary schools, MLK and Armstrong, will be having its culminating event on June 7th at Bellevue Elementary School, beginning 5 o'clock, 5 to 7. So we will have a panel discussion with our young people from MLK and Armstrong, followed by an award ceremony. The panel discussion will focus on the 5 pillars of community of caring and how they can enrich the community in which we live. So it promises to be a very informative culminating event. So I encourage everyone to go. But second, also, not just an announcement, but I did want to ask, we've talked about this before, we haven't done anything that the board received diversity training in for our, wanted to see if we could look at our board policy agenda or calendar, because I would like for us at our next meeting to discuss human resources, specifically to discuss policies dealing with our staffing, our priority schools. I can send information about that later on. But I do think that we need to have these discussions now as we are recruiting, and hopefully we can get an update on the recruitment to date and actions going forward. So that is what I request for new business.
okay, so just to remind everyone, the superintendent will bring forward information regarding HR, staffing, recruitment, summer school staffing, etc. The June 4th meeting. And Ms. Lilly, what is the HR fall as far as policy review again?
HR is the 7th section in your policy manual. We have completed up through the community relations section, which was section 4. Instruction is slated to be next, and auxiliary services is the 6th section. And so, as I expressed earlier, if there's a particular policy that needs to come out of cycle, we can tackle that policy. I don't know if it's feasible to tackle the entire human resources personnel section now, but if it's just the ones, a couple of policies that we can bring forward, then we can work on doing that. The idea was to wait until later in the summer to get back on track with the completed schedule for the policy provisions.
So Ms. Cosby, have you identified some policies of HR?
The policy in HR, we currently do not have a policy that addresses how we staff our priority schools. And the reason why I would like to look at this, and hopefully before we get too far into the summer, is because right now, especially as we're talking about equity, right now, I'll just use MLK as an example, we have a disproportionate number of new teachers compared to master teachers. And if we have a priority school, that has got to be addressed immediately in terms, and I don't want to depend on practice. I think it needs to be a policy. You know, if the VDOE changes categories and is not priority, what have you, we can make those revisions. But we do need to look at this, and we need to look to see if there are going to be any budget implications as well as we look at this policy, or look at a version of some type of policy in place so that we don't have that in our priority schools. It's difficult for a new teacher, it's difficult for a principal, we need to really look at and be very intentional in how we staff our schools across the board, but especially in how we staff our priority schools.
I certainly share that concern. I think any change in policy that would require the hiring of certain types of teachers or changes to ratios and things of that nature, I think would be exceedingly difficult to implement at this point in the year for next year, just given where we are, given the fact that we have flat operating revenue going into next year, and given the sort of cycle of recruitment and hiring. But I think I would welcome and be deeply engaged on a broader conversation on our HR policies as we get into the 18-19 year for the following cycle. If there is an acute issue at a particular school, my request would be that that is raised so we can sit down and see if there's something that we can figure out for this season. But I think a writ large change to policy that we don't have the time to fully understand the implications of, given where we're at the season, might be extraordinarily difficult.
Okay, understood. And I just want to make sure it is on our radar, and if we can indeed have conversations now, even if it's something that's implemented the next school year. But I do want us to look at, if we're not going to change policy right now, at least look at our practice, and as I said before, be very intentional about our staffing for this upcoming school year. We're in a state of, we have to address these things with a sense of urgency, and I think if we are intentional, that perhaps some changes can be made. That's my hope.
Agreed. Thank you.
And just as a reminder, I want to make sure we have a listening session for the renaming of Jeb Stuart tomorrow at Virginia Union University at the Living and Learning Center. And then just want to remind you again that the public hearing will be held on June 4th in City Hall. Ms. Burke.
Also, our superintendent is scheduled tomorrow to be at Shimarox Elementary School in the 7th District. Correct, Mr. Cameras, for the talks that you're currently giving? The dream, was it dream, RPS Dreams?
I'm checking. Yes. Yes, at 6 o'clock.
Right.
I will be there.
So I will be in the 7th District tomorrow.
Next item.
Pursuant to section 2.2-3711A1 Code of Virginia 1950 as amended, I move that the school board of the city of Richmond convene in closed session to discuss prospective candidates for employment and the assignment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of employees of the division, including consideration of the human resources agenda of this state.
All in favor?
Need a second, Ms. Page?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't.
Next second.
It's been motion by Ms. Owen and seconded by Ms. Burke. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are now in closed.
Board members, closed session will be in room 201. 202 where your dinners were.